Talking about platinum group elements, we're talking about gold. We just talked about some of the principles of life, getting alkaline, what that can do for our energy, what that can do for our immunity, being immune to different types of things floating around. Then we talked about enzymes and how enzymes are so important for our organs to refurbish, for us to actually get back to a state where we're rejuvenating, where the spiral towards demise is actually going in the other direction. Okay? Now, here's where the platinum group elements come in. Remember, he was talking about the DNA. It's been found in laboratory studies that really one experience is present throughout all. They thought it was impossible for DNA to unwind. How many people know DNA is a spiral? You've all seen the pictures. Okay, so if you can imagine taking the two ends and tightening that spiral, giving it a good turn or two, that's what's happening from the day we're born to the day we die. It's the biological marker of aging itself. Your body gets 50 to 80 some turns of the DNA. That's tightenings of the helix. Okay? Now, every time it does that, it's able to replicate a cell. Interesting. Let's keep that in mind. Now, if that's the case, then the DNA is getting tighter and tighter until it's all wound up. And you've all heard stress will make you age. And we know that when we see somebody stressed, we say they're all wound up. You know, the subconscious mind of the human collective psyche just knows this stuff. Pops out in our language without even thinking about it, right? But one thing has been discovered to unwind DNA. Anybody want to give a crack at what it is? Huh? Well, yeah, only under one condition though. And I'll tell you the primary nutrient, even before oxygen, is love. Right? Right? It's the primary nutrient, right? And so what we find is that any time that they have the DNA and somebody is feeling love, that the magnetic fields of the heart, which can be measured from 50 feet away, these are powerful magnetic fields that can actually be measured by science. And they discover that DNA in petri dishes and samples in laboratories, in the presence of a field that is feeling love, those DNA helixes begin to unwind. The biological marker of anti-aging, literally. It's getting younger at the DNA level. Now, here's where platinum group elements come into play. Because what is it about love? Okay, if you look at DNA, it's this geometric structure. And if you know anything about singers, you get a wine glass. If you get just the right tone matched to the structure, the mass, and the shape of that wine glass, the resonance will cause it to build up energy. And that build up energy, you will either force a change of form, like was talked about by Bruce Lipton, or it'll cause the system to shatter if it can't handle change. DNA is intelligent though, it can handle change. So what happens when we get feeling love is something happens. Our brain waves and our heart rate variability, that's the relationship between all the pieces of the heartbeat, the rhythms, the peak, the valley. What is the distance between the two? When that comes out to something known as the golden mean in mathematics, this is little geometry, you know, high school geometry. If you talk about the golden mean, it's a very specific mathematical pattern. And that our brain actually goes into this pattern, as well as our heart, our breath, our craniosacral pulse, every biorhythm of the body, including the voice, goes into this when we're feeling love. Every emotion, in fact, has its own signature that holds through for all species. So literally, it's now possible. It's not really scary, but it's amazing that you could actually, with the technology that's being used for healing, where I learned some of this, where we could actually take a vocal scan of a person and tell within 2 days what their birthday was and what was going on in the metabolism, the organs, the glands, it's all present there. This is being used by high-end also surveillance to be able to tell if somebody's fearful when they're talking on the phone. This is all there. And you know it. You don't have to have the technology. You know, husbands and wives, you know, it's there. You can't explain why, but you can tell there's something there. And now it's mathematically definable. And what we found by defining it is that the very pattern that happens in the brain at the moment of love is this, what we call the golden mean. And that what happens in the heart at the moment of love is this pattern called the golden mean. And that it turns out that while we all have these mental, emotional, physical, spiritual capacities, and ultimately we are all love and have the capacity for infinite love, sometimes it's like a little swimming upstream. There's challenging life conditions, and how we experience that is all very individual. Nevertheless, we can all admit that when we're feeling good, it's a little bit easier to be more loving, right? Okay, so now here's the clincher. It turns out that ocean water has all the minerals of the mineral table in the exact proportion used by the blood. And it has gold, platinum, indium, iridium, rhodium, and that every couple 100 million years, supposedly according to the geological record, the oceans swim over the, the planet flips upside down and the oceans have inertia. They keep going and they saturate all the soil with all the rare platinum group elements, and that'll be good for a couple billion millenniums or whatever, But sooner or later, you end up with trace deficiencies in the soil. And almost all of the soil, no matter what theory you subscribe to, they've measured the soil and they're deficient. They're not there. And yet, our body shows the ability to use these nutrients. If they're not there and our body has a way to utilize them, what would happen if, we just gave it to them? Find out what happens. We might have never known as a generation or two. Maybe it's been hundreds of generations since our DNA knew what it was like to operate with a full deck, elementally speaking. See, every element is a species in the elemental kingdom. Each plays a unique role in the cosmos of our body. Little bacteria, every cell is a life form. Every cell eats and excretes, moves towards pleasure, away from pain. Lives in a world as big to it as ours is to us, has to communicate perfectly. It has to perform a specialized function, and if it doesn't, it dies. And even when it does die, it's got a lifespan. If it's a stomach cell, maybe 3 days. A liver cell, a couple weeks. Muscle cells, a couple months. Bone cells, brain cells, up to 7 years. And yet, we don't sit down and have a funeral every time one goes. It's like they're autonomous beings. They're doing their best they can in the world they got. But we know ourselves to be something larger than that. And what happens finally when we get the full spectrum of nature in all of the right places? For example, when we get the elements in the right spot in our body, we discover that just as our cells are part of something larger and we know where that, but maybe they don't, maybe they do. We also are a part of something far larger. And sometimes we know, sometimes we don't. It's okay, either way. We find that not knowing is like a rosebud. Knowing is like a rose, and in due season they all bloom. What happens when you're a flower in a field, it's springtime, and you're the first one to peel back your beautiful little petals, and you look around and there's all these buds. It's season, it's just about ready to go off. You happen to be the first one. Do you look around and go, oh, I'm so evolved? I'm so evolved. Look at all these buds. And in the lifespan of a flower, it feels good for like maybe a day, but then it's like, wow, we get to shine our glory together. And it's beautiful. So that's what we're at the cusp of right now. 3 years from now, the other 99.999% of the population, this is going to be information that spreads quickly at the ground roots level. They're going to be asking one question. Where's my superfoods? Where's the gold? Give me the gold. Yeah. And all through history, we've kind of invested gold as like, it's almost been idolatrous. Even back in, the old stories of ancient times, they made a golden calf. They bowed down to it on the outside. And but what does it say? People don't even keep reading. Keep reading. It says Moses, who was schooled in all the high arts of Egypt, and alchemy came from Egypt, by the way. They knew how to make the red powders and white powders of gold. But what does it say? It says Moses ground the gold up into a fine powder in the fire. We know gold doesn't turn into powder, it melts, unless you know the ancient alchemical art which makes the powder. And then it says he put it in the water, and then it says he made the children of Israel drink of it. Hey, sounds like they were eating gold. And so, take the externalized projection of what we would bow down to as the solution is out there, and remember that when we take dominion of the kingdom and unite the hemispheres of our brain and our true essential nature that resides in the heart of every one of us, and actually get enough energy to live that into the world, life transforms. Not from a fear place, not from a like, oh, I can't take this, but like you jump right out of your skins into something that you maybe never believed you could do, but dreamed as a child that you wanted to. And that's what's possible. That's what we see happening all over.